Hi, it's Sarah, and in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make your website faster. So I think we are all quite aware that having a fast website is good. And also the speed of your website is something that Google does take into consideration. So fast is good, but how do we go about making our website faster? How do we know what to look for? It can be a bit overwhelming if you're not entirely sure. So the first thing to think about, if you are coming into 2020 and thinking, right, how can I improve the performance of my website? The first thing you want to think about is where your website is hosted. That's really important. And I think it's so important to invest as much as you can in good quality hosting, especially if you are selling products or services online through your website. So I use Cloudways hosting, which is great for me and is scalable as well as my business grows. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for people who aren't pretty au fait with how hosting works and websites already. It is a managed hosting platform, but it's a little bit different to maybe if you've used cPanel before, for example. It's not cPanel based hosting, and it's not the easiest if you don't have a bit of a clue what you're doing. So I always recommend, if you are like a small business owner and you just want something affordable that is scalable and is good quality hosting, is usually SiteGround is a good one to go for. And it's important, whatever hosting platform you have, is that you make sure your PHP version is up to date on them, because there are some like the cheaper kind of shared hosting, where you kind of have to go in to cPanel and update PHP yourself, because they're not always up to date, and this can really, as well as causing problems with the performance of your website, it can cause problems with the security of it as well. General updates, say for example, if you are on a WordPress website, WordPress updates, plugin updates, are they covered for you, or is that something you have to do yourself? A lot of hosting now you can turn on automatic updates so when there's a new version of WordPress core, it will automatically get updated, which is great, but you may still have to go in and update your own plugins. How do you check if, how fast your website is? You might have no idea. So a good thing to start with, if you have no idea, is simply to go to Google's PageSpeed Insights. So what I've already done here is put my website through and analysed it. And as we can see, the score isn't very good here on PageSpeed Insights. I mean, this is the ideal 90 to 100, but 50 to 89, you really should be in there. So if we're in the red, we're not doing so well. So there's a few improvements I need to make. So it looks all a bit scientific here as well. But basically, Google's sort of gone through my website and seen how long it takes to load. So there are a few things on my website, like cookie banners and online chat, things like that, which will inevitably affect the speed load time. It depends what you've got on your site. But Google here is then telling me, some of the things I could do to save some time and how much estimated time. So this is a big one, it like defer off-screen images, and it'll tell you a bit more and about how you can maybe solve the problem. So in this case, maybe I could install a lazy load WordPress plugin, and that would help me to defer off-screen images and therefore save a bit of time. It'll also show me which images on my website are taking a while. So these are some of the bigger ones, and we'll go over that again in a minute. Images. Serving images in next generation formats, so it tells you a bit more about that as well, rather than PNG images. Maybe more up-to-date image formats would be useful. So this will obviously vary depending from website to website, depending on what needs doing, but it's a good overview of what you can do to improve things. It can be quite technical, so you might have to do a bit of reading up if you're not entirely sure. Another thing I use is a WordPress plugin. So this is in the back end of my site, and they've got a WordPress plugin called Hummingbird by WPMU Dev. And you can run performance tests with Hummingbird. Again, you can see on this one, I've got 62 out of 100. And again, it will tell you, there's some crossover here and what it's telling me I could save and what suggestions I could do to improve the site. It will also give some more diagnostics. So it's quite similar to the Google one, maybe a little bit more sort of friendly if you have really no clue what you're doing. I would say this one's probably a bit friendlier. Also tells you what kind of things you've passed, which is nice. Things you're getting these right, you're doing good at these. So if you're looking for maybe some room to improve, again, it will tell you a bit more and figure out what you can do. If it's image related, it will link to Smush, which is what I'm going to talk a bit more about in a second. And finally, another way to check the performance of your website is managewp.com. So this is what I use to kind of run and maintain all my different websites, and you can check performance on here. And we've got grades, PageSpeed grade and YSlow grade as well. So again, this PageSpeed is related to Google PageSpeed. Again, it can be a little bit more. It just literally gives you a grade here, so you can quickly see, what needs working on and what seems to be okay. So I've got like 0% for this one, so that's at the bottom. It's probably something to look at because it's 0%. So again, it will tell you, and often you will find that it's image related, as you can see with this, mainly because I've worked on a few different things on my website, but images I haven't worked on recently and uploaded a lot of new ones. So yeah, let's talk about images, because this is something we see a lot, and obviously over the free tests I've just had a look at there. Images is a problem on my website and is a problem on lots of people's, because they are often the wrong size. They are often uploaded the wrong size. They're often massive, and I think I've talked about this in other blog posts and videos as well. But look at your images if you want to make your site faster, because they are often massive. And again, if you're using Hummingbird, actually it tells you to set up Smush, which is an image compression plugin for WordPress, and that is a really good plugin because you can work with that to make images smaller that are already on your site. And also, if you're uploading images and Smush is already installed, it will make sure that they are kind of the right size and not too big, and smush them down, which can be really useful in keeping on top of things. But do look at those images you're putting on your website. Are they, what size image are you uploading? If you're uploading a massive image and you only need it displayed in maybe a little window, say, right, let's look at an example. So obviously this is going to need to be a big image because it's at the top in a big hero banner. But then we've got images like this, and we've got these images here for like a blog post image, which are often displayed quite small throughout the site. They might be in a different size on the actual post page, but they're usually quite small. So if I'm uploading massive images here for like this blog post, then that's maybe a bit unnecessary, and I could save some space with those kind of things, as well as making sure that the image type is like a next gen image, as it says, or a more up-to-date one than maybe like PNG, for example. So another thing that's been talked about over the reports is things about reducing the impact of third-party code. So like, for example, on this one, it will say third-party code. Things that are on my website, which are often plugin related, is trying to load that code after your page is primarily finish loading. So some of these I could maybe do something with, and some maybe not so much unless I'm really kind of fluent in code. But it does bring me on to something that's important to look at generally, which is if you have a WordPress site, what plugins you have. So often they can impact the performance and load speed if you've got a lot of plugins. Just make sure really that the plugins you have on your website are really necessary for your website. You know, you've not got maybe loads of old ones that you've collected over time which are still activated on your website that you're not really using. Then, you know, deactivate and delete them. Just make sure as well, perhaps where you can, buy pro versions of plugins and choose plugins that you know are regularly updated and maintained by the developers. So as well as plugins, we've also got another important aspect of speeding up your website, which is caching. So you might have heard of website caching, and I've got a caching plugin on mine, which is Breeze. Now that is a caching plugin that's provided by my hosting provider, which is Cloudways. So that would automatically come with that. If you're on another hosting solution, again, some of those often, if you can go into cPanel and you know your way around, you can find that there will be a caching option in your hosting. If you can't find that, there are also, again, third-party WordPress plugins which are useful for caching your website. It's really good to have these because they essentially, they take us like a snapshot of like a website page, for example. Their browser has already got that like snapshot of my website, and it will load quicker for them. Now there are like tons of options with caching as well to how often you cache your website page, and they usually come, if it's a plugin, they'll usually come with sort of preset options which are usually fairly sensible. So you could usually go along with those, and as long as you sort of turn caching on, then a lot often you'll be kind of good to go, and you don't need to worry too much about all the intricate settings unless either you want to play about or you know a bit more about what you're doing. One thing to remember with caching plugins, if you are making updates to your website and then you look on the front end and you cannot see them, which I've done myself before, is where you've got your caching plugin turned on, and it's cached a copy of your website for you to view. So when you view your website, you can't see any particular changes you've made. And so that's where you need to turn the caching plugin off and refresh and reload the website in your browser, and then you'll be able to see the updated version. That can also happen, say you update a plugin, for example, on your website, and it causes something on your site to break, which can happen. You might not always see it straight away, because if you have got a caching plugin installed and active, you're going to then see the old version before you updated it, possibly. And then, you know, your website will look fine to you and you can't see anything wrong, and you might get people contacting you going, oh, there's something wrong with your website, and that's because they visited it and got the new version, not the cached version that you have in your browser. So caching plugins are, I would say, they're really, really useful for improving the speed of your website. Definitely, you really need one if you want to make your website faster. Whether you have the kind of technical expertise and the knowledge to really go in and tweak all the settings so it's perfect, you know, so it's performing the best it can be, it's one of those middle grounds. But I think if you aren't so sure, get a plugin installed or turn it on your hosting if you can, and, you know, work with the settings that have already been pre-selected for you often, and that will in itself be an improvement. So those are some ways in which you can make your WordPress website a little bit faster and perform a little bit better. And I know that a lot of those options can seem quite like overwhelming and maybe a bit confusing if you're like just a small business owner and you just kind of know that you need to improve the speed of your website. But it can seem a bit overwhelming. So I am working on a solution that will kind of tick those boxes for people and keep things covered where, as a small business owner, you can have a fairly simple website where, you know, all that sort of thing, performance wise and speed, is all taken care of by me, so you don't have to worry about that. But if you want to have a go yourself, then those are a few tips for you. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Hope this has helped.